That box contains stolen military property. Those were the exact words Karen, the HOA president, screamed at the cops as she tried to get my wife, Sophia, arrested on our front lawn, in front of the entire neighborhood. The shrill wail of police sirens tore through the calm morning of Willow Creek Estates. 2 patrol cars sped down our street, red and blue lights flickering against windows, glinting off mailboxes, and dancing across the dew-covered lawns. Curtains rustled as neighbors peeked out, a few of them already holding up their phones to capture what they believed would be the perfect neighborhood scandal. Sophia stood on the front steps, clutching a wooden box engraved with the American flag tightly against her chest, her face calm, her eyes sharp, unblinking, refusing to flinch. Marcus stood by her side, my hand raised slightly, trying to shield her, my body shaking with the mixture of anger and fear coursing through me. And there was Karen, wearing her neat turtleneck and a smug, satisfied smirk, eyes glinting with the cold delight of a predator about to strike down what she assumed was easy prey. "She's stealing military property! Arrest her!" Right now. Karen's shrill voice cut through the tension, and the entire street fell silent, waiting, expecting the officers to move in, to drag Sophia away in handcuffs so they could gossip about it for months. A teenager across the street zoomed in with his phone camera, capturing Sophia's clenched hands, the honor flag box pressed against her, the smugness on Karen's face as she crossed her arms with a look that said she believed she had won. But just as Karen's fantasy was about to unfold, Sheriff Davis stepped out of his vehicle. His polished black boots hit the pavement, and he stood tall, his eyes sweeping over Karen with a glance before settling firmly on Sophia. The air shifted. The neighbors, the cameras, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Karen opened her mouth, her finger half raised to point at Sophia, but it froze mid-air as Sheriff Davis lifted his right hand in a crisp, sharp salute, his voice ringing out low and authoritative. "Good to see you again, Major Martinez." Karen's face went pale. Phones lowered as the weight of the moment sank in. A breeze fluttered the American flag on our porch as sunlight broke through the morning clouds, illuminating Sophia's face as she nodded back, her eyes steady, proud with not a single hint of fear. In that moment, Karen realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She had no idea that the woman she was trying to humiliate in front of the entire neighborhood, the woman she assumed was weak and easy to intimidate, was a respected military officer, a woman who had walked through battlefields far more dangerous than any petty HOA power game Karen could ever play. If you've ever dreamed of that perfect, peaceful American suburb, neatly trimmed lawns, rows of crisp white mailboxes, homes glowing warmly in the evenings with the faint scent of apple pie drifting on the breeze, then Willow Creek Estates would look like a dream come true. Marcus and Sophia came here searching for a fresh start. After years of Sophia's military service and carefully saving every dollar, they finally stepped into what they hoped would be a peaceful life in their own home. On that first morning, as sunlight filtered through the leaves, Marcus stood on the porch with his coffee, smiling as he watched Sophia carefully adjusting the American flag in front of their new house. But Willow Creek Estates wasn't just apple pie and freshly cut grass. It had an uncrowned Queen Karen. Karen wasn't old, but she wasn't young either. She was thin with sharp eyes and a walk that meant business, her footsteps quick and precise on the brick-paved sidewalks. She always carried a clipboard and a red pen, like a sword and shield. Every morning, Karen appeared like the neighborhood's living alarm clock. She would walk past every house, scanning trash bins, measuring blades of grass that dared grow a fraction too tall, noting water stains on driveways and peering at the smallest specks on garage doors. She would greet neighbors with a polite smile, but her eyes flickered sharply, cataloging every minor infraction that would end up as a citation tucked under someone's door before sunset. The day Marcus and Sophia moved in, Karen appeared within 45 minutes of the moving truck arriving. She walked up, a thin smile on her lips, her eyes darting over the boxes being carried inside, the truck's parking angle, the way Marcus and Sophia moved with their belongings. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates," Karen said, her voice light, but the air seemed to grow colder around her. "We maintain a certain standard here." Marcus thought she was just being neighborly in the American way. But Sophia, with the instincts of someone who had seen far more serious situations, recognized the control behind that sweet smile. Karen didn't need to raise her voice to assert her authority. She used the HOA rulebook like a silent weapon, binding every resident with the fear of fines, the fear of being labeled as non-compliant. and the fear of becoming the topic of whispered conversations during backyard barbecues. Marcus would later recall that on their first night, he saw Karen standing behind her window across the street, the warm glow of a lamp casting her shadow as she stared out at the street where their moving truck was pulling away. Those eyes were not welcoming. They were the eyes of someone who had ruled Willow Creek Estates for too long, someone who believed that anyone moving into this neighborhood would eventually bow to her rules. Marcus and Sophia wanted peace when they moved to Willow Creek Estates. But what they didn't know was that within the first hour, they had already crossed paths with the neighborhood dictator. And Sophia, more than anyone, understood that dictators, no matter how small, fear one thing above all: the truth, and people who are unafraid of them. That morning, as the sun began drying the dew on the grass, Sophia carefully lifted a wooden box engraved with the American flag from the back of the moving truck, carrying it up the steps to their new home with the kind of reverence you give something sacred. It wasn't just a box. Inside were military medals, a carefully folded American flag, and mementos Sophia had kept close after years of service overseas, pieces of a life she carried with quiet pride. But as Sophia stepped up to the door, Karen appeared. She didn't knock. She didn't wait to be invited. She simply stood in Sophia's path, eyes locked on the box in Sophia's arms, then flicking up to study Sophia's face with an unfiltered, piercing scrutiny. "What's in that box?" Karen's voice was cold, lacking any of the warmth you might expect from a neighbor's greeting. Sophia's hands tightened around the box, but she said nothing, her eyes steady, unflinching, meeting Karen's gaze without fear. Karen's lips curled into a slight smirk, dropping her voice just enough for Marcus, standing a few feet away, to hear. "Your wife seems soft." Marcus froze. The way Karen said it, dripping with dismissive contempt, sliced into him. He stepped forward, ready to fire back. But Sophia simply gave a small shake of her head, her eyes calm as a still lake, though Marcus knew beneath that calm was the sharp focus of someone who had been in far more dangerous standoffs. Karen stood there for a moment longer, her eyes glinting with satisfaction at the silence, before turning and walking away, leaving a heavy tension hanging on the front porch. It didn't end there. The very next morning, Marcus stepped outside and found a yellow slip tucked under the garage handle: HOA in failure to remove cardboard boxes promptly. Fine $75. The bold red letters felt like a slap across the face in what should have been a peaceful morning. Marcus clenched the paper in his fist, anger flooding through him. Sophia stepped out beside him, glanced at the paper, then at Marcus, and quietly took the citation, folding it neatly and placing it in a folder she had prepared just the day before. But that was just the first one. The next day, another citation arrived: grass height exceeds 0.5-inch regulation. Trash bins placed outside 10 minutes before permitted time. And another: flower pots not in compliance with HOA approved color standards. One after another, Karen turned every minor aspect of Marcus and Sophia's life into a finable offense. At first, Marcus burned with the urge to storm over to Karen's house, to tell her she was out of line, to demand she stop harassing them. But Sophia remained silent, waking up early to mow the lawn precisely, adjusting the trash bins, repainting the flower pots. It wasn't because she was afraid. It wasn't because she was weak. Sophia knew this wasn't a battle to be won with loud arguments. Every citation Karen delivered, Sophia carefully documented, logging the date, taking photos with their security camera, filing each slip in her growing folder. And every time Karen walked away, Marcus began to notice how Sophia would stand by the window, her eyes calm, watching, tracking, studying the woman who believed she was untouchable. Karen thought she was winning, that her citations and petty intimidation would force Marcus and Sophia to submit. But she didn't realize that Sophia wasn't someone who cowered under cheap threats. She didn't know that every citation she delivered was becoming another piece of evidence Sophia was quietly collecting, preparing for a counterattack Karen would never see coming. Karen believed those yellow slips with her scrawled red signature were the perfect weapon, breaking any resident who dared or defy the neighborhood's petty rules. But to Sophia, each citation was nothing more than another piece of paper, folded neatly, organized chronologically in a folder she kept by the entryway. Karen began to grow obsessed with teaching Sophia a lesson. Every morning, Karen walked the sidewalk, ruler in hand, bending over to measure each blade of grass in front of Marcus and Sophia's house, jotting down notes with precise movements. She peered through windows, eyes scanning inside, hoping to catch even the smallest infraction to find them again. But every time Karen passed, Sophia would be there on the porch, adjusting the American flag, her gaze calm yet sharp, a silent reminder that she had faced far more dangerous enemies than Karen, and this was nothing to fear. Marcus started to realize it. In the evenings, as Sophia wiped down the kitchen counter after dinner, she would carefully remove each citation, slide it into her growing folder. Marcus would ask, "Why aren't you fighting back? Why are you letting her get away with this?" Sophia would simply smile, her eyes reflecting a depth and steel Marcus knew came from years spent in places he could barely imagine. "Because I need her confident, Marcus. The more confident she is, the bigger mistakes she'll make." Karen didn't stop at citations. When Sophia didn't react, Karen escalated with dirty retaliation. One morning, when Sophia turned on the sprinkler, water shot up uncontrollably, flooding the yard. Marcus discovered the hose had been cleanly cut, the cuts too precise to be an accident. A few days later, Marcus went to take out their car and found the windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Small rocks still scattered near the driveway, faint shoe prints pressed into the concrete. That same afternoon, another citation arrived. Vehicle negatively impacts neighborhood aesthetics. Karen had vandalized their car, and then fined them for it. Marcus was ready to storm over to Karen's house to demand she stop. But Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, shaking her head calmly. "Don't. Let her dig her own grave." Sophia's silence became Karen's nightmare. With every citation, Karen expected rage, expected pleading, expected fear. But all she received in return was Sophia's calm gaze, the quiet way she removed the citation, the soft click of the door closing as Sophia walked back inside without a word. Karen started losing sleep. She found herself looking out her window at night, seeing the warm glow of a desk lamp in Sophia's house, her silhouette seated calmly at the table, surrounded by papers and her laptop. And for the first time, Karen felt a gnawing unease creeping in. Because just when Karen thought she was in control, Sophia was quietly preparing a counterattack Karen would never see coming. Because a woman who remains silent is not a woman who is weak. A woman who remains silent is watching, waiting, and planning exactly how to end the game on her terms. Karen truly believed she was winning. She thought that her meaningless citations and dirty little acts of sabotage would break Sophia's resolve, rile Marcus into an outburst, and force them to pack up and leave Willow Creek Estates quietly, leaving Karen to continue ruling her precious kingdom. But what Karen didn't know was that Sophia's silence wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of a quiet investigation already in motion. One evening, Mr. Walter, the elderly neighbor at the end of the street, knocked on Marcus and Sophia's door. He stood nervously on the porch, eyes darting around the street before whispering, "I shouldn't get involved, but last year, the HOA collected $90,000 from residents, and it just disappeared. No one's dared to ask about it because of her." Sophia invited him in, handing him a warm cup of tea, her face calm, but Marcus noticed a spark ignite in Sophia's eyes. The next day, Sophia opened her laptop, and for the first time, Marcus saw her working with the intensity of a soldier preparing for a critical mission. They started digging through public HOA financial statements. They found community event, expenses matching high-end restaurant bills. They found maintenance fees that aligned perfectly with spa trips, a Cancun resort stay, and even a Caribbean cruise. They found a birthday community celebration, listed at 8 Salazard, suspiciously aligning with Karen's birthday posts of champagne parties on Facebook. Sophia quietly saved every piece of evidence, screenshotting Karen's posts, cross-referencing dates with HOA transactions. Marcus helped print copies, organizing them into a thickening folder that grew heavier each day. Late one evening, Marcus overheard Sophia speaking on the phone outside, her voice low, calm, and commanding in a tone he had never heard her use in daily life. "Yes, sir. Civilian target. Approximate amount to 73,000. I need a discreet audit and documentation that will hold up in court." Marcus froze. This wasn't the Sophia who made morning coffee and adjusted the flag on the porch. This was Sophia, Major Martinez, the soldier who had led people under fire, stepping back into her true self when injustice needed to be confronted. While Karen continued to strut through the neighborhood, peeking into yards, scribbling citations for uneven grass or leaky sprinklers, Sophia was quietly peeling back the layers of a fraud that had hidden in the HOA for years. And as Karen walked the sidewalks, clipboard in hand, smirking at neighbors, she had no idea that every step she took was being documented, every citation becoming evidence, every luxurious Facebook post becoming an arrow aimed at the mask she had worn for 7 years. Marcus sat on the couch, watching Sophia organize the documents, her eyes sharp, movements precise. He finally asked, "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Sophia looked up, her eyes steady and unwavering. "Karen thinks she's winning. But I'm going to show her, this isn't her kingdom. This is our home." Karen had become careless, overconfident. And at the very moment she believed she was untouchable, her carefully crafted mask was about to slip. It was Thursday afternoon at the Willow Creek Estates Community Center, and a special emergency HOA meeting had been called, at Karen's request. Karen strutted in, clutching a thick folder she had been preparing for days, scanning the packed room filled with residents. People who had once feared every phone call, every yellow slip she sent their way. She stepped up to the podium, wearing a confident smile. "We have a serious problem. Certain individuals are threatening the order of our community, using military connections to intimidate and manipulate the HOA." Sophia sat in the front row, calm. Beside her, Marcus rested a hand on her shoulder, glancing around at the curious, nervous faces of their neighbors now turning toward them. Karen began her presentation, projecting photos of Marcus's cracked windshield, images of trash bins out of position, and reading out emails Sophia had sent the HOA requesting financial transparency. Karen's smirk widened, her tone dripping with condescension. "This is clear evidence of harassment and manipulation against your HOA, using supposed connections to law enforcement." The room fell silent, tension heavy like a storm waiting to break. Then, Sophia stood, walking forward, placing a folder twice as thick as Karen's onto the table with a quiet thud. She opened it, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to bring the truth to this community." Sophia began to project HOA financial statements onto the screen. Each community event, expense matched with Facebook photos of Karen sipping champagne on a Caribbean cruise, lounging at a Cancun resort. She displayed spa receipts and fine dining charges that aligned perfectly with HOA stress management claims. A photo of Karen holding a wine glass at her birthday party appeared on the screen, matched with a line in the financials. "Community birthday celebration £8,000. Whispers rippled across the room. Elderly Mr. Walter Rose, voice shaking but strong. "She threatened to condemn my home when I complained about the broken streetlights." A young mother stood, holding her child. "We got fined for our kids playing basketball, but she threw loud parties every weekend." Story after story, testimony after testimony pierced the carefully maintained image Karen had worn for years. Karen began to tremble, her face draining of color, stuttering. I did this for the community. I deserve this." Sheriff Davis entered the meeting room, his eyes meeting Sophia's with a respectful nod before turning to Corinne. "Karen, we have received formal complaints and substantial evidence regarding embezzlement of HOA funds. We need you to come with us for questioning." Karen collapsed into her chair, hands covering her face, sobbing audibly as her world unraveled. Sophia turned to Marcus, her eyes steady with resolve. "This is just the beginning." In that moment, the residents of Willow Creek Estates realized they had finally been freed from Karen's invisible reign of fear. Karen didn't realize that her greed and arrogance had led her to this downfall. And the woman who quietly adjusted her American flag each morning on the porch was the one who stood up and brought justice back to an entire community. Karen was escorted out of that meeting in front of the entire Willow Creek Estates community. The clink of handcuffs, the heavy sound of her footsteps as she was led away, blended with the soft flapping of the American flag outside in the afternoon breeze. Neighbors who once trembled at Karen's knocks on their doors, who quietly tiptoed around her citations, now stood tall, watching her leave with no fear in their eyes. A few weeks later, Karen's house bore a "for sale" sign. The day she moved out, there were no goodbyes, no neighbors waving her off. Only the low rumble of a moving truck carrying away the belongings she had bought with the community's stolen funds. As the truck turned the final corner, Sophia stood on her porch, the American flag in her hands, surrounded by Marcus and neighbors who had gathered. Walter brought the ladder, the neighborhood boy held the flagpole steady, and the young mother once fined for her children's laughter handed Sophia a new flag clip. Together, they raised the American flag on Sophia's porch. "We let her control our lives for far too long," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, eyes resolute. "But bullies only have power when good people stay silent." Willow Creek Estates began to change. The ridiculous HOA rules about grass length, flower pot colors, and trash can placement were scrapped. The HOA was restructured to focus on respect and mutual care, not fear and intimidation. Barbecues returned to the neighborhood. Children played basketball without worry, and the elderly walked their dogs without lowering their eyes as they passed. Or house. When the residents asked Sophia to become the new HOA president, she smiled softly and shook her head. Leadership isn't about having power over people. It's about empowering people to take care of each other. Sophia didn't need a title to lead this community, because true leadership doesn't require power. It requires courage and a heart willing to stand up when it matters. Willow Creek Estates gradually returned to what it was meant to be, a true home. In the mornings, Sophia would raise the American flag on the porch as the breeze gently swept across calm rooftops. Marcus mowed the lawn, Walter waved while walking his old dog, and children rode their bikes along the sidewalks, laughter echoing through streets that were once weighed down by tension and fear. There was no more tiptoeing to take out the trash, no eyes peering from across the street, no fear of yellow slips forcing people to bow their heads. Everyone began to live their lives with respect for each other, not out of fear of Karen, but because they had learned that silence often enables injustice. Sophia remained the same. She still made coffee for Marcus every morning, still greeted neighbors with a gentle smile, still raised the American flag with careful hands. But now, people looked at her differently, with gratitude for being the one who stood up when it mattered most. This story isn't just about an HOA Karen, about petty citations or stolen funds. It is a story about how when one person has the courage to stand up, an entire community can find its voice again. You may not be Sophia. You may never have to confront a Karen in your neighborhood, but you can be the person who stands up for what's right when everyone else is silent. If this story inspired you, share it so others know they are not alone when standing up against injustice. Comment, I believe in justice. If you believe in a community where people can live with respect and freedom. And don't forget to subscribe to Echo Stories, so you won't miss the next powerful true story, because the next one will make you realize that justice always exists, as long as someone dares to stand up. Thank you for joining us for this story on this channel. See you in the next one.